I used to watch a serial on television called Adventure Theater, and they had Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe on it, and I used to love that.
Picture this. You're watching a movie where the main character saved the universe, and suddenly you realize that almost everything you're seeing was created by accident, born from desperate decisions, and filled with secrets that Hollywood tried to hide for decades. Well, that's exactly what happened with Flash Gordon, and today I'm going to blow your mind with the weirdest, most unbelievable stories behind this legendary space hero that you've probably never heard before. What if I told you that Flash Gordon almost never existed? What if I told you that the famous theme song we all know and love was written in just 10 minutes? And what if I revealed that one of the most expensive movie flops in history actually saved an entire franchise? Stick around, because these stories are so wild, you won't believe they're true. Let's start with something that will make you question everything you know about Flash Gordon. The character wasn't supposed to be named Flash Gordon at all. Back in 1934, when comic strip creator Alex Raymond first dreamed up the space-traveling hero, he wanted to call him Flash Burns. Can you imagine? Flash Burns flying through space, fighting Ming the Merciless? It sounds more like a cooking accident than a superhero adventure. But here's where it gets really weird. The name Gordon came from a completely random source. Raymond was sitting in his office, struggling with what to call his new character, when he looked out his window and saw a sign for Gordon's Gin. That's right, one of the most famous science fiction heroes of all time got his last name from an alcohol advertisement. If Raymond had been looking in a different direction, we might have been cheering for Flash McDonald's or Flash Coca-Cola instead. The strange naming coincidences don't stop there. Ming the Merciless, Flash's greatest enemy, got his name in an equally bizarre way. Raymond wanted a villain name that sounded both exotic and threatening. He was flipping through a Chinese restaurant menu when he saw the word Ming listed as part of a dish name. Within seconds, he decided that would be perfect for his evil emperor. So, basically, Flash Gordon's most dangerous enemy was named after someone's dinner order. Now, let me tell you about the most expensive mistake in movie history that accidentally created a masterpiece. When producer Dino De Laurentiis decided to make a Flash Gordon movie in 1980, he had no idea he was about to create one of the most wonderfully weird films ever made. The budget was supposed to be modest, but everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The original plan was to make a serious, dramatic space opera that would compete with Star Wars. De Laurentiis hired respected director Mike Hodges and assembled what he thought would be a straightforward science fiction adventure. But from day one, nothing went according to plan. The special effects team couldn't make the flying sequences look realistic with their budget. The costumes were so heavy that actors could barely move, and the sets were so elaborate that they kept collapsing during filming. Instead of scrapping the project, something magical happened. The cast and crew embraced the chaos and decided to make the campiest, most over-the-top space adventure possible. They cranked up the colors until everything looked like a rainbow exploded. They made the dialogue so dramatic that every sentence sounded like Shakespeare having a nervous breakdown. And they encouraged the actors to perform like they were in the world's most expensive high school play. The result was a movie that cost nearly $40 million and made almost no money at the box office. Critics called it a disaster. Audiences stayed home. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Over the years, this failure became one of the most beloved cult classics of all time. People started watching it specifically because it was so wonderfully ridiculous. What was meant to be a serious competitor to Star Wars became something far more special, a joyful celebration of pure, unashamed fun. But the real magic behind the 1980 Flash Gordon movie wasn't the visuals or the acting. It was the soundtrack created by the legendary rock band Queen. And the story of how Queen got involved is absolutely incredible. Freddie Mercury was a massive Flash Gordon fan. He had grown up reading the comic strips and watching the old serials on television. When he heard that Hollywood was making a new Flash Gordon movie, he desperately wanted Queen to be involved. But the movie studio had already hired a traditional film composer to create the score. Mercury wouldn't give up. He kept calling the producers, showing up at their offices, and even wrote sample songs without being asked. The executives thought he was crazy. Why would they want a rock band to score a science fiction movie? It had never been done before, and they were sure it would be a disaster. Then something changed their minds. The original composer quit the project at the last minute, leaving the producers in a panic. With no time to find a replacement, they reluctantly agreed to let Queen try. The band had just 2 weeks to create an entire movie soundtrack. What happened next was pure magic. Queen locked themselves in the studio and created one of the most iconic theme songs in movie history, the famous Flash, Savior of the Universe. Anthem was written in a single 10-minute session. Mercury heard the melody in his head, sang it into a recorder, and the band immediately knew they had something special. But here's the part that will blow your mind. Mercury wrote most of the lyrics by watching the movie scenes without any sound. He would study Flash's expressions, Ming's evil schemes, and the space battles, then create songs that matched the emotions he saw on screen. It was like composing music for a silent film, except the film wasn't actually silent. The Queen soundtrack turned the 1980 Flash Gordon movie into something completely unique. Instead of traditional orchestral score, audiences heard pounding rock anthems that made every scene feel like the most exciting moment of their lives. When Flash fought Ming, Queen's guitar screamed along. When Flash kissed Dale Arden, the music swelled with romantic power. It was unlike anything anyone had ever experienced in a movie theater. Now, let's talk about the actors, because the casting of Flash Gordon involves some of the weirdest decisions and strangest coincidences in Hollywood history. The role of Flash was originally offered to Kurt Russell, who turned it down to make Escape from New York instead. Then it was offered to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who said no because he didn't want to play a blonde American hero. Finally, it went to Sam Jones, a relatively unknown actor who got the part for the most ridiculous reason imaginable. Sam Jones was chosen to play Flash Gordon because he looked good in tight pants. That's it. That's literally the main reason. The casting director saw him at an audition, noticed how the costume fit him, and decided he was perfect for the role. Jones had very little acting experience and had never done a major film before, but he looked like a comic book hero come to life, and in the world of Flash Gordon, that was apparently enough. The casting of Ming the Merciless was even weirder. The producers wanted an actor who could look both terrifying and ridiculous at the same time. They auditioned dozens of serious dramatic actors, but none of them could capture the right balance of menace and absurdity. Then Max von Sydow walked into the audition room. Von Sydow was a respected Swedish actor known for serious, intellectual films. He had worked with legendary director Ingmar Bergman and was considered one of the finest dramatic actors in the world. The last thing anyone expected was for him to want to play a cartoon villain in a space opera. But Von Sydow surprised everyone by delivering the most perfectly over-the-top audition they had ever seen. He growled his lines like a Shakespearean villain, raised his eyebrows like a silent movie star, and somehow made Ming both genuinely frightening and hilariously dramatic. The producers hired him immediately, and Von Sydow later said that playing Ming the Merciless was one of the most fun experiences of his entire career. Here's something that will make you appreciate the 1980 movie even more. Almost all the special effects were created using techniques that seem impossible today. There were no computer graphics, no digital effects, just pure creativity and determination. The flying sequences were filmed using a technique called front projection, where actors were suspended on nearly invisible wires against projected backgrounds. The problem was that this technique had never been used for scenes as complex as the ones in Flash Gordon. The effects team had to invent new methods on the spot. They built enormous rotating drums to simulate Flash flying through space. They created miniature cities that were so detailed you could see tiny windows and doors on buildings that appeared on screen for just seconds. The most incredible effect was War Rocket Ajax, Ming's giant spaceship. The model was over 6 feet long and took 3 months to build. It was covered in thousands of tiny lights that had to be individually wired and programmed. The ship was so heavy that it required a team of 6 people just to move it around the studio. And all of this work was done for a vessel that appears in the movie for less than 5 minutes total. But the absolute weirdest thing about Flash Gordon isn't something you see on screen. It's something that happened behind the scenes that changed the entire future of science fiction movies. George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, was originally supposed to direct a Flash Gordon movie in the 1970s. He had grown up loving the old serials and desperately wanted to bring the character to the big screen. Lucas spent months developing his Flash Gordon project. He created detailed storyboards, wrote multiple script drafts, and even began designing costumes and spaceships. But when he tried to secure the rights to the character, he ran into a problem. The rights holders wanted too much money and too much creative control. They didn't trust a young, relatively unknown director with their valuable property. Frustrated and disappointed, Lucas decided to create his own space adventure instead. He took all the elements he loved about Flash Gordon, the heroic journey, the exotic planets, the evil empire, the mystical powers, and combined them into something new. That something new became Star Wars, the most successful science fiction franchise in history. Think about that for a moment. If the Flash Gordon rights holders had been more reasonable, George Lucas might never have created Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, or the Jedi. The entire Star Wars universe exists because Flash Gordon was too expensive to license. It's one of the most important what-if moments in entertainment history. The influence of Flash Gordon on Star Wars is obvious once you know what to look for. Both stories feature young heroes who discover they have special powers. Both have wise mentors who guide the heroes on their journeys. Both include princesses who need rescuing, but turn out to be strong fighters themselves. And both feature climactic battles against massive space stations controlled by evil empires. Lucas has always been honest about Flash Gordon's influence on his work. He has said in interviews that Star Wars is essentially his love letter to the adventure serials he watched as a child. When he finally got the chance to produce his own Flash Gordon project decades later, he jumped at the opportunity, even though he knew it might not be commercially successful. But the weird connections between Flash Gordon and other famous movies don't end with Star Wars. The 1980 Flash Gordon movie influenced dozens of other films in ways that most people never realize. The bright, colorful visual style inspired everything from The Fifth Element to Guardians of the Galaxy. The over-the-top dialogue and dramatic acting became a template for movies that want to be both exciting and funny at the same time. Even more surprising is how Flash Gordon influenced music beyond Queen's iconic soundtrack. The electronic music in the movie, composed by Howard Blake working alongside Queen, helped establish the sound that would later be used in movies like Blade Runner and Tron. The combination of rock music and electronic sounds created a new way of scoring science fiction films that is still used today. The cultural impact of Flash Gordon extends far beyond movies and music. The character influenced comic book creators like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who created characters like the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer based partly on Flash Gordon adventures. The visual design of Flash Gordon comics influenced everything from Superman to the X-Men. Even video games owe a debt to Flash Gordon. The space opera setting, the mix of science and fantasy elements, and the episodic adventure structure became standard elements in countless games. From Mass Effect to Star Fox, you can see Flash Gordon's influence in games that transport players to exotic worlds filled with strange creatures and advanced technology. One of the most surprising Flash Gordon influences is on real space exploration. Several NASA scientists have admitted that Flash Gordon stories inspired them to pursue careers in aerospace engineering. The optimistic vision of space travel as an adventure filled with discovery and wonder helped shape how an entire generation thought about the possibilities of exploring the universe. But perhaps the weirdest legacy of Flash Gordon is how it predicted the future in ways that nobody expected. The 1930s comic strips featured video phones, flat-screen televisions, and handheld communication devices decades before they became reality. Flash Gordon's stories showed people using tablet computers and GPS navigation systems long before anyone thought such things were possible. The environmental themes in Flash Gordon's stories were also ahead of their time. Many adventures featured plots about planets being destroyed by pollution or natural resources being depleted by greedy corporations. These stories were exploring ecological concerns in the 1930s and 1940s, decades before environmentalism became a mainstream movement. Even the social themes in Flash Gordon were surprisingly progressive for their time. Dale Arden was portrayed as Flash's equal partner rather than just a helpless victim. Princess Aura was shown as a complex character who could be both an enemy and an ally. These stories featured strong female characters at a time when most adventure fiction relegated women to purely supporting roles. The lasting appeal of Flash Gordon comes from something that the creators probably never intended: the pure joy of storytelling. Whether you're reading the original comic strips, watching the old movie serials, or enjoying the 1980 film, Flash Gordon adventures are filled with a sense of wonder and excitement that feels genuine and infectious. There's something magical about stories that aren't afraid to be ridiculous. Flash Gordon never pretends to be realistic or plausible. It's a universe where people can breathe in space, where exotic planets are just a short rocket ride away, and where good always triumphs over evil through courage and determination. In a world that often feels complicated and uncertain, Flash Gordon offers a comfort of simple, heroic adventure. The weirdest thing about Flash Gordon might be that it continues to find new audiences nearly a century after it was created. Each generation discovers these stories and finds something different to love about them. Kids enjoy the colorful adventures and clear-cut heroes and villains. Adults appreciate the craftsmanship and creativity that went into creating entire fictional universes with limited resources. Film scholars study Flash Gordon as an example of how popular entertainment can become genuine art through passion and commitment. Today, Flash Gordon remains relevant because it represents something that seems to be disappearing from modern entertainment. Stories that are created purely to bring joy and excitement to audiences. There are no hidden meanings to decode, no complex moral ambiguities to wrestle with, just the simple pleasure of watching a hero save a universe through bravery and determination. As we look back at all these weird, wonderful, and surprising facts about Flash Gordon, one thing becomes clear. The best stories are often the ones that happen by accident, created by people who are just trying to entertain themselves and their audiences. Flash Gordon may have started as a simple comic strip designed to compete with Buck Rogers, but it became something much more important. A reminder that imagination and creativity can create worlds that last forever. So the next time you hear Queen's Flash Gordon theme song, or see a movie with colorful alien worlds and heroic space adventures, remember that you're experiencing the legacy of a character who got his name from a gin advertisement, whose greatest enemy was named after a restaurant menu item, and whose most famous movie adaptation was created by embracing every mistake and turning them into pure entertainment magic. If these wild Flash Gordon stories amaze you as much as they amaze me, make sure to smash that like button to let me know. Share this video with any science fiction fans in your life who need to hear these incredible behind-the-scenes secrets. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more mind-blowing stories about your favorite movies, shows, and characters. Trust me, if Flash Gordon taught us anything, it's that the real world can be just as strange and exciting as any fictional universe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.